What happens when a brilliant doctor discovers that saving a dying child means destroying 3 lives, including her own? When Sarah Martinez walked into that mansion for what she thought was a simple dinner, she had no idea she was about to lose her medical license, her reputation, and custody of the 8-year-old boy she'd raised as her own son. This is the story of a woman who had to choose between following the rules and following her heart, between medical ethics and maternal love, between justice and survival. You're about to witness a 60-minute psychological thriller where a pediatric oncologist goes head-to-head with a tech billionaire's family, where fake recordings destroy careers, where $250,000 disappears overnight, and where the most dangerous enemy turns out to be the person offering help. But here's what makes this story different. Every devastating betrayal you're about to hear actually makes perfect sense when you understand the hidden motivations driving each character. Every shocking twist has been carefully planted from the very first scene, and the final revelation will completely change how you view everything that came before. This isn't just a story about revenge. It's about what happens when desperate people discover just how far they're willing to go to protect the ones they love. So settle in, because the next hour will take you on a journey through medical conspiracies, financial fraud, and family secrets that will leave you questioning everything you thought you knew about right and wrong. The Last Supper is about to begin, and by the time it's over, nothing will ever be the same. The fluorescent lights of Seattle Children's Hospital cast harsh shadows across Dr. Sarah Martinez's face as she stared at the test results. 8 years old. Acute lymphoblastic leukemia. Relapsed. The words blurred together as tears threatened to spill from her exhausted eyes. "Tommy," she whispered to the sleeping boy in the hospital bed. Her nephew's pale face looked so small against the stark white pillows. His mother, Sarah's sister Elena, had died in a car accident 3 years ago, leaving Tommy in Sarah's care. He was all the family she had left. The door creaked open, and Dr. Patricia Wong, the hospital's chief of oncology, stepped inside. "Sarah, I'm so sorry," Patricia said softly. "The cancer is more aggressive this time. We're looking at experimental treatments. But the costs—" "How much?" Sarah's voice was steady, clinical. She had learned to compartmentalize during her 10 years as a pediatric oncologist. 200,000 for the initial treatment protocol, possibly more for ongoing care. Sarah's heart sank. Her divorce from tech billionaire David Sterling had been finalized 6 months ago. The settlement had been generous, but she donated most of it to the hospital's cancer research fund, keeping only enough for a modest apartment and basic expenses. She had always lived simply, believing that money should serve others, not accumulate in personal accounts. Her phone buzzed, David Sterling calling. She almost declined, but something made her answer. "Sarah." His voice was warm, familiar. For a moment, she remembered the man she'd fallen in love with 12 years ago, before the money and success had changed everything. "David, this isn't a good time. I heard about Tommy. I'm sorry." She closed her eyes. Of course he'd heard. David had connections everywhere, and bad news traveled fast in their former social circles. "Thank you," she managed. "Listen, I know we didn't end on the best terms, but Tommy's family. If you need anything—" Before Sarah could respond, another voice cut through the background on David's end. High-pitched, demanding. "David, honey, we need to discuss the seating arrangements for tonight. Your mother specifically requested—" Jessica Cole, 28 years old, 2 million Instagram followers, and David's new girlfriend. The woman who had been photographed leaving his apartment during their marriage counseling sessions. "I have to go," David said quickly. "But Sarah, seriously, if you need help with medical bills or anything—" The line went dead. Sarah stared at her phone, feeling the familiar ache of betrayal mixed with desperate hope. David had hurt her deeply, but he was also one of the few people in the world who could afford Tommy's treatment without blinking. 20 minutes later, her phone rang again. This time it was Margaret Sterling. "Sarah, dear." Margaret's refined Southern accent carried through the speaker like silk over steel. "I hope you don't mind me calling directly. Mrs. Sterling." Sarah kept her voice neutral. Margaret had never been warm to her during the marriage, viewing Sarah's medical career as a distraction from her duties as David's wife. The older woman had made it clear that she expected Sarah to quit medicine and focus on producing sterling heirs. I'm calling about David's future. There's going to be a dinner tonight, and I need you to be there. I don't think that's appropriate. It's about more than propriety, dear. David is at a crossroads and certain decisions need to be made. Your presence would be educational for all parties involved. Sarah felt a chill run down her spine. Margaret Sterling never did anything without a calculated purpose. I'm at the hospital with Tommy. He's very sick. Yes, I heard. Terrible business. Children's illnesses always are. Margaret's tone suggested she was discussing the weather. 8 o'clock. The estate. Don't disappoint me, Sarah. The line went dead. Sarah looked down at Tommy, who was stirring awake. His dark eyes, so much like Elena's, focused on her face. Aunt Sarah, do I have to stay here tonight? Just for a few more days, sweetheart. The doctors want to make sure you're getting better. He nodded solemnly. At 8, Tommy had already learned not to ask too many questions about his illness. It broke Sarah's heart. I love you, buddy. Love you too. He closed his eyes again. Sarah kissed his forehead and walked to the window. The Seattle skyline stretched before her, David's tech company's building prominent among the towers. Somewhere in that gleaming structure, her ex-husband was probably preparing for the dinner his mother had orchestrated. She pulled out her phone and called her colleague Dr. Martinez to cover her evening shift. Whatever Margaret Sterling was planning, Sarah had a feeling she would need all her strength to face it. Outside, storm clouds gathered over Elliott Bay, and Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that the real storm was just beginning. David Sterling stood in his downtown penthouse, adjusting his Italian silk tie as he watched Jessica Cole apply another layer of mascara. Her reflection in the bathroom mirror was flawless, every highlight and contour precisely placed to catch the light. Your mother is going to love me, Jessica said, practicing her smile. I've researched everything about her charity work, her bridge club, even her favorite wine. David nodded absently. At 42, he had learned that his mother's approval was both essential and nearly impossible to earn. Margaret Sterling had built the family fortune from her father's modest steel business into a tech empire spanning 3 continents. Her opinion could make or destroy careers, relationships, and reputations with equal efficiency. Just be yourself, he said, though they both knew that wasn't entirely true. Jessica had been coaching herself for weeks, studying videos of Margaret's public appearances and taking etiquette lessons from a former diplomat's wife. David, honey, we should talk about what happens after tonight. Jessica turned from the mirror, her expression suddenly serious. If your mother approves of us, really approves, then we need to discuss next steps. Next steps? Marriage, children, the future of the Sterling legacy. She moved closer, her perfectly manicured fingers straightening his collar. I'm not getting any younger, and neither are you. David felt a familiar tightness in his chest, the same feeling he'd experienced during the final months of his marriage to Sarah, when every conversation felt like a negotiation, every moment together calculated for maximum benefit. Let's get through dinner first, he said. Jessica's smile flickered, but she nodded. Of course, one step at a time. David's phone buzzed with a text from his assistant. Mrs. Sterling requests you arrive 30 minutes early. Urgent family matter to discuss. Change of plans, David told Jessica. Mom wants to see me alone first. Can you get there around 8:15? Is everything okay? With my mother, you never know. An hour later, David pulled his Tesla through the iron gates of the Sterling estate. The Tudor-style mansion sat on 12 acres overlooking Puget Sound, its stone facade and manicured gardens projecting an image of old-money respectability. David had grown up in these halls, but the house had never felt like home. It was a stage, a backdrop for the performance of wealth and power. Margaret Sterling waited in the library, a crystal glass of scotch in her hand despite the early hour. At 68, she was still striking, her silver hair styled in an elegant chignon and her posture military straight. David, she didn't smile. Sit down. He took the leather chair across from her, the same chair where he'd received countless lectures about responsibility, legacy, and the importance of the Sterling name. I've been thinking about your marriage, Margaret began without preamble. Which one? The one that ended or the one you're hoping will begin? Don't be glib. It doesn't suit you. She sipped her scotch. Your marriage to Sarah was a mistake. I told you that from the beginning. David bristled. Sarah is a brilliant doctor. She saves children's lives. Sarah is a distraction. She put her career before your family, before your needs, before the dynasty we're building. Margaret leaned forward. But that's in the past. Tonight is about the future. Jessica seems to understand what's expected of her. Does she? Margaret's smile was sharp. We'll see about that. A soft chime indicated someone at the front gate. Margaret glanced at her watch. That would be our other guest. Other guest? I took the liberty of inviting Sarah. David shot to his feet. You did what? Sit down. Margaret's voice carried the authority of someone accustomed to absolute obedience. Sarah needs to see what she gave up. Jessica needs to see what she's competing with. And you need to see the difference between a woman who loves you and a woman who loves what you can provide. This is cruel even for you. This is necessary. The Sterling family has survived 3 generations because we make hard choices. Tonight, you'll make yours. David sank back into his chair, his mind racing. He thought about Sarah at the hospital, probably exhausted from another 18-hour shift, caring for children like Tommy. Then he thought about Jessica, beautiful and ambitious, already planning their future with the precision of a military campaign. Why does it matter so much to you? He asked. Margaret stood and walked to the window, gazing out at the gardens where David had played as a child. Your father and I built this empire for you, David. But empires don't maintain themselves. They require the right partnerships, the right alliances, the right bloodlines. She turned back to him, her eyes cold. Sarah would have diluted our strength. Jessica might strengthen it. Tonight we'll find out which. The front door chimed again. Margaret checked her phone. Jessica has arrived. Show her to the dining room and make her comfortable. I'll be along shortly. David hesitated. What are you planning? I'm planning to save our family from another generation of weakness. She finished her scotch. Don't disappoint me, son. As David walked toward the foyer, he caught a glimpse of himself in the hallway mirror. He looked successful, confident, everything a Sterling man should be. But underneath the expensive suit and practiced charm, he felt like a boy again, desperate for his mother's approval and terrified of her judgment. The Last Supper was about to begin, and David had the sinking feeling that by the time it ended, nothing would ever be the same. Sarah arrived at the Sterling estate 20 minutes late, having stopped to check on Tommy one final time. The familiar sight of the mansion's Gothic towers and perfectly trimmed hedges brought back a flood of memories, most of them painful. She had lived here for 3 years during her marriage, never quite feeling like she belonged among the oil paintings and antique furniture. The house was a museum, beautiful but cold, designed to impress rather than welcome. Marcus, the longtime butler, greeted her at the door with a sympathetic smile. Dr. Martinez, he said warmly, it's good to see you again, though I'm sorry about the circumstances. Thank you, Marcus. How have you been? Same as always, ma'am. Mrs. Sterling is waiting in the drawing room. Sarah followed him through the marble-floored foyer, past the portraits of Sterling ancestors who had made their fortunes in steel, oil, and technology. At the end of the hall, she could hear laughter from the dining room. Jessica's laughter, bright and performative. Margaret Sterling stood by the fireplace in the drawing room, elegant as always in a navy Chanel suit. But there was something predatory in her posture, like a cat preparing to pounce. Sarah, dear, thank you for coming. Margaret's smile didn't reach her eyes. I know this must be difficult, with everything that's happening. Why did you want me here, Mrs. Sterling? Please call me Margaret. We're family after all. Or we were. She gestured toward a leather armchair. Sit. We need to discuss David's future. Sarah remained standing. That's not really my concern anymore. Isn't it? You spent 7 years building a life with my son. Surely you have some investment in seeing him make good choices? Through the archway, Sarah could see into the dining room, where David and Jessica sat at the mahogany table. Jessica was animated, gesturing as she told some story, her diamond bracelet catching the candlelight. David looked handsome but tired, the way he always looked when he was performing, rather than relaxing. He seems happy, Sarah said quietly. Does he? Margaret moved to stand beside her. Look closer. Sarah studied David's face. She knew his expressions better than anyone. The slight tension around his eyes, the way his smile never quite reached full wattage, the unconscious fidgeting with his wedding ring. Wait, he was still wearing his wedding ring. He's going through the motions, Margaret continued, playing the part he thinks is expected of him. But you and I both know David has never been good at choosing partners. He chose you because you were safe, familiar. Now he's chosen Jessica because she's exciting. Different. What does this have to do with me? Everything. Margaret turned to face her directly. That girl in there is a predator, Sarah. She's been feeding information to gossip bloggers about David's divorce, positioning herself as the wrong party who helped him heal. She's built her entire brand around being the other woman who got the man. Sarah felt a chill. How do you know this? I make it my business to know everything about the people who enter my son's life. Jessica Cole isn't her real name, by the way. She was born Jennifer Collins in Tacoma, daughter of a used car salesman and a convenience store clerk. Nothing wrong with that, of course, but it does explain her determination to climb the social ladder. The revelation hit Sarah like a physical blow. She had wondered how the media always seemed to know so much about her and David's private moments during the divorce proceedings. She's been documenting everything, Margaret continued. Photos of David's apartment, screenshots of their text conversations, even recordings of phone calls. She's building a portfolio for when she inevitably writes a tell-all book or lands a reality show deal. Why are you telling me this? Because despite everything, I believe you genuinely cared for my son, and because that woman is about to destroy him in ways you never could. From the dining room came the sound of chairs scraping against hardwood floors. They're coming, Margaret said. Sarah, I need you to do something for me. For David. What? Stay for dinner. Watch. Listen. And when the time comes, help me save him from making the biggest mistake of his life. Before Sarah could respond, David appeared in the doorway, Jessica close behind him. His face went pale when he saw Sarah. Sarah, what are you doing here? I invited her, Margaret said smoothly. Family dinner, after all. Jessica, dear, you look lovely. Jessica's expression flickered between confusion and annoyance, but she recovered quickly. Sarah, what a surprise. She moved forward with her arms extended, as if they were old friends meeting for lunch. How are you holding up? David told me about your nephew. I can't imagine what you're going through. The hug was brief but long enough for Jessica to whisper in Sarah's ear. Play along, and I'll make sure David helps with the medical bills. Sarah pulled back, searching Jessica's face. The younger woman's expression was perfectly sympathetic, but her eyes held a calculating intelligence that made Sarah's skin crawl. That's very kind of you, Sarah managed. Of course, we're all family here, right? Jessica's smile was brilliant. I was just telling David how much I admire doctors. The sacrifice, the dedication. It takes a special person to put others' needs before their own. The comment landed like a barb. During their marriage, David had frequently complained that Sarah cared more about her patients than her husband. It had been their constant source of conflict. Shall we sit down to dinner? Margaret suggested. I'm sure Sarah's hungry after her long day at the hospital. As they moved toward the dining room, Jessica fell into step beside Sarah. I meant what I said, she whispered, about helping Tommy. David feels terrible about how things ended between you two. He wants to make it right. For the first time since arriving, Sarah felt a flicker of hope. Maybe this evening wouldn't be the disaster she'd anticipated. Maybe Jessica was genuinely trying to help bridge the gap between her and David. Maybe there was still a chance to save Tommy. She had no idea she was walking directly into a carefully orchestrated trap. The Sterling family dining room had been designed to intimidate. 20-foot ceilings, crystal chandeliers, and a mahogany table that could seat 16 created an atmosphere of formal grandeur. Tonight, the four-place settings looked almost lost in the vast space. Sarah found herself seated across from Jessica, with David at the head of the table and Margaret at the foot. The arrangement felt deliberately confrontational, like opponents facing off in a boxing ring. So Jessica, Margaret began as the first course was served, tell me about your work. I run a lifestyle brand focused on empowering women to live their best lives, Jessica replied with practiced enthusiasm. We have partnerships with several luxury brands and a growing social media presence. How fascinating. And how exactly does one monetize empowerment? David shot his mother a warning look, but Margaret's expression remained innocently curious. Through authentic partnerships and content creation, Jessica continued unfazed, it's about building trust with your audience and then connecting them with products and experiences that align with their values. I see. And your audience trusts you to make decisions about David's life as well? The question hung in the air like a loaded weapon. Sarah saw Jessica's jaw tighten almost imperceptibly. I'm not sure I understand what you mean. Margaret took a delicate sip of wine. Oh, I think you do. The photos of David's apartment in Architectural Digest last month, the candid shots of you two at charity events, the carefully orchestrated paparazzi encounters. You've done an admirable job of branding your relationship. Mother, David said sharply, I'm simply acknowledging Jessica's business acumen, Margaret replied. It takes real talent to turn a personal relationship into a professional opportunity. Sarah watched the exchange with growing unease. She had seen Margaret dismantle business rivals with the same surgical precision, always maintaining perfect composure while delivering devastating blows. Jessica, however, held her ground. I've been nothing but supportive of David, unlike some people who put their careers ahead of their marriages. The attack was swift and brutal. Sarah felt the blood drain from her face as every eye at the table turned toward her. That's enough, David said, his voice tight. No, it's fine, Sarah said quietly. Jessica's right. I did put my work first sometimes. When Tommy was first diagnosed, I spent weeks at the hospital with him instead of at home with David. I thought saving a child's life was more important than attending business dinners. And how did that work out for you? Jessica asked, her tone deceptively sweet. The cruelty of the comment landed like a physical blow. Sarah's hands shook as she reached for her wineglass. Margaret leaned forward, her eyes fixed on Jessica with laser intensity. Tell me, dear, how is your own family? Your parents must be so proud of your success. They're very supportive, Jessica replied, but Sarah noticed a slight tremor in her voice. I'm sure they are, though I imagine it must have been difficult growing up in Tacoma. Such a charming industrial town. Jessica's face went white. I don't know what you're implying. I'm not implying anything. I'm stating facts. Jennifer Collins, daughter of Frank Collins, who owned Collins Used Cars until it went bankrupt in 2010. Your mother, Linda, worked the night shift at a 7-Eleven to make ends meet. You changed your name when you moved to Seattle, didn't you? There's nothing wrong with reinventing yourself, Jessica said, but her confident facade was cracking. Of course not. Though I do wonder what else you've reinvented. Your age, perhaps. The modeling career that never quite took off. The community college education you've upgraded to a bachelor's degree from UW? David stared at Jessica in shock. You told me you graduated from Washington. I did take classes there, Jessica said desperately. Online courses, Margaret clarified. 2 of them. Introduction to Marketing and Social Media Fundamentals. The silence that followed was deafening. Sarah watched Jessica's carefully constructed persona crumble in real time. But instead of feeling vindicated, she felt only sadness. She recognized the desperation in the younger woman's eyes, the fear of being exposed as insufficient. Why does any of this matter? Sarah asked quietly. So what if she changed her name or embellished her background? People do what they have to do to survive. Margaret turned to her with surprise. Sarah, dear, you're being remarkably generous to someone who just mocked your nephew's illness. Oichorn. The words hit Sarah like a sledgehammer. In her sympathy for Jessica's embarrassment, she had almost forgotten the cruel comment about Tommy. My nephew is dying, Sarah said, her voice stronger now. He's 8 years old, and he might not see his 9th birthday. So excuse me if I don't have patience for whatever game you're all playing here. She stood abruptly, her chair scraping against the hardwood floor. David, I made a mistake coming here. Tommy needs me, and I need to be with him. Wait, David said, rising from his seat. Sarah, please don't go. About Tommy's treatment, I meant what I said earlier. Whatever you need, I'll help. Will you? Sarah turned to face him, tears streaming down her cheeks. Because right now, Tommy needs $200,000 for experimental treatment. Will you write that check, David? Tonight? The question hung in the air like a challenge. Sarah saw the conflict in David's eyes. The war between his guilt over their marriage and his uncertainty about their future. It was Jessica who broke the silence. "Of course he will," she said, her voice steady despite the tears in her own eyes. "Won't you, David? Tommy's family." David looked between the two women, both of whom had claimed to love him, both of whom were now asking him to prove his worth through his wallet. "I'll transfer the money tomorrow," he said finally. Sarah felt a rush of relief so intense it made her dizzy. "Thank you," she whispered. But Margaret Sterling was smiling, and Sarah realized with growing dread that the evening was far from over. "How wonderful," Margaret said. "Though I'm afraid there might be one small complication with that arrangement." She reached into her purse and pulled out a manila folder, placing it on the table with ceremonial precision. "You see, David doesn't actually control his trust fund anymore. I do, and I've decided to redirect those resources toward more worthy causes." Sarah felt the hope drain from her body like water from a broken dam. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying," Margaret replied with cold satisfaction, "that if you want my help with Tommy's treatment, you're going to have to earn it." The manila folder sat on the table like a coiled snake, waiting to strike. Margaret Sterling's fingers drummed against the mahogany surface as she studied the three faces staring back at her. "What do you mean, earn it?" Sarah's voice was barely above a whisper. Margaret opened the folder and withdrew a single sheet of paper. "A simple agreement. You sign this document acknowledging that your marriage to David failed due to your own professional priorities, and I'll ensure Tommy receives the best treatment available." Sarah reached for the paper with trembling hands. The legal language was dense, but certain phrases jumped out at her. "Admits to spousal neglect, abandonment of marital duties, prioritizing career over family obligations." "This is a confession," she said, looking up at Margaret in disbelief. "It's an acknowledgement of truth. You chose your patients over your husband. You chose medicine over marriage. You chose everyone else's children over the family David wanted to build with you." "That's not fair," David interjected. "Sarah's work is important. She saves lives." "Does she?" Margaret's tone was conversational, almost friendly. "Tell me, Sarah, how many children have you lost? How many families have you watched crumble while you fought battles you couldn't win?" The question hit Sarah like a physical blow. She thought about all the children she hadn't been able to save, all the parents she'd had to comfort while delivering devastating news. The faces haunted her dreams, a parade of small coffins and shattered hopes. "That's not the point," she said weakly. "Isn't it? You pour yourself into these tragic cases, exhausting yourself emotionally and physically, while your own life falls apart around you. Tommy isn't even your child, Sarah. He's your sister's son. Elena died 3 years ago, and you've been trying to save him ever since as some sort of penance." "Elena died because she was driving to pick up Tommy from my house," Sarah said, her voice breaking. "She died because I asked her to come get him so I could work late on a research grant. So yes, maybe I'm trying to make amends." "And now you're about to lose Tommy too, unless you admit the truth about what kind of woman you really are." Sarah stared at the document, her vision blurring with tears. Around the table, she could feel the weight of everyone's expectations pressing down on her like a physical force. "I need some air," she said, standing abruptly. "Of course, dear," Margaret said smoothly. "The ladies' room is just down the hall. Take all the time you need." Sarah fled the dining room, her heels clicking against the marble floor as she made her way to the bathroom. She closed the door behind her and leaned against it, trying to catch her breath. The face staring back at her from the mirror was almost unrecognizable. Her usual composure was gone, replaced by raw desperation and exhaustion. She looked like the parents she counseled, the ones who would do anything to save their children. A soft knock interrupted her thoughts. "Sarah? It's Jessica. Can I come in?" Sarah hesitated, then unlocked the door. Jessica slipped inside, her expression genuinely concerned. "Are you okay?" she asked. "No," Sarah said simply. "I'm not okay at all." Jessica moved to the sink beside her, pretending to check her lipstick in the mirror. "Listen, I know we got off on the wrong foot tonight. Margaret's been awful to both of us. She's protecting her son, I understand that. And is she, though? Or is she playing some kind of twisted game?" Jessica lowered her voice. "I heard David on the phone earlier. He wants to help Tommy. He feels terrible about how things ended between you two. Sarah studied Jessica's reflection in the mirror. The younger woman seemed sincere, almost vulnerable. Why are you being kind to me? Sarah asked. Because I know what it's like to fight for survival. My background might not be as polished as Margaret would prefer, but I understand desperation. Jessica turned to face her directly. Look, I care about David. I want him to be happy. And I think he'll never be truly happy if he lets Tommy die because his mother's playing puppet master. What are you saying? I'm saying I'll help you. I'll convince David to write that check tonight, regardless of what Margaret wants. Tommy shouldn't suffer because the adults in his life can't figure out their relationships. Sarah felt a surge of hope so intense it made her dizzy. You would do that? Yes, but you have to trust me, okay? Let me handle Margaret and David. Don't sign that document, no matter what she says. I have a plan. What kind of plan? Jessica smiled, and for the first time that evening, it seemed genuine. The kind that gives everyone what they really want. Margaret wants to control David. David wants to feel like a good person. You want Tommy to live. I can make all of that happen. They returned to the dining room together, where David and Margaret were engaged in a heated, whispered conversation that stopped abruptly when they entered. Feeling better, dear? Margaret asked with false concern. Much better, Sarah replied, taking her seat. Thank you. Wonderful. Now about that document. Actually, Jessica interrupted, I have something to share with everyone. She reached into her purse and pulled out her phone, setting it on the table. David, remember when you asked me to document our relationship for social media? David looked confused. What are you talking about? Jessica tapped her phone screen, and suddenly the room filled with the sound of David's voice. The divorce was the best thing that ever happened to me. Sarah was suffocating. All she cared about was work and that kid of hers. I couldn't be happier to be done with all that drama. Sarah felt the blood drain from her face as she recognized the conversation. It was from 2 months ago when she had called David to discuss Tommy's first relapse. She had heard Jessica laughing in the background. I never said that, David said, staring at Jessica in horror. You did, Jessica replied calmly. Right after Sarah called about Tommy's cancer returning. You said you were glad to be free of her constant medical emergencies and emotional baggage. That's not true, Jessica continued playing the recording. I'm building a new life with Jessica. Sarah chose her career over our marriage, and now she has to live with the consequences. I'm not responsible for fixing her mistakes. Sarah stood slowly, her legs unsteady beneath her. The hope that had sustained her for the past 20 minutes crumbled like sand. How could you? She whispered. Sarah, that's not my voice, David said desperately. I never said those things. It sounds exactly like you, Margaret observed with interest. Technology these days is remarkable, isn't it? Voice synthesis, deep fakes. It's almost impossible to tell what's real anymore. Jessica's smile was triumphant. Oh, this is real. Every word. David's been very honest about his feelings toward his ex-wife and her family obligations. Sarah grabbed her purse, no longer able to remain in the room. As she headed toward the door, she heard Margaret's voice behind her. The offer still stands, dear. Sign the document, and Tommy gets his treatment. Otherwise, well, I'm sure the Children's Hospital has payment plans. Sarah paused in the doorway without turning around. You're all monsters, she said quietly. Every one of you. She walked out into the Seattle night, her phone already buzzing with messages from the hospital. Tommy's condition was worsening. She had less than 24 hours to secure funding for his treatment. Behind her, the Last Supper continued, but Sarah had lost her appetite for whatever game they were playing. She had a child to save, and she was running out of time. Sarah sat in her Toyota Camry outside the Sterling estate, her hands gripping the steering wheel as she tried to process what had just happened. Her phone buzzed constantly with updates from the hospital, each message more urgent than the last. Dr. Wong, Tommy's white blood cell count is critical. We need to start treatment within 18 hours. Dr. Rodriguez, insurance denied the experimental protocol. Need payment authorization ASAP. Dr. Kim, Sarah, where are you? Tommy's asking for you. The last message broke her resolve. She started the engine and drove through the rain-slick Seattle streets toward the hospital, her mind racing through options she didn't have. Her savings account had $12,000. Her retirement fund had $38,000, but early withdrawal would cost her 40% in penalties. Her medical practice was thriving, but liquidating assets would take weeks, not hours. She pulled into the hospital parking garage and sat in the darkness, surrounded by the cars of other desperate families fighting their own battles against impossible odds. This was the universal dilemma every parent faced when their child's life hung in the balance. How far would you go? What would you sacrifice? What lines would you cross? Her phone rang. David Sterling. Sarah, please don't hang up. What do you want, David? That recording, it's not real. Jessica manipulated audio from different conversations to make it sound like I said those things. Sarah closed her eyes. It doesn't matter anymore. It does matter. I never said I was glad our marriage ended. I never called Tommy a burden. I would never. Then why didn't you stop her? Why didn't you defend me when your mother was tearing me apart? The silence stretched between them, filled with 3 years of accumulated resentment and regret. I don't know, David said finally. I keep trying to please everyone, and I end up helping no one. My mother, Jessica, you, I can't seem to do right by any of you. This isn't about you, David. This is about a little boy who's dying while we play games with lawyers and trust funds. Then let me help. I'll find a way around my mother's restrictions. I'll liquidate personal assets, take out loans, whatever it takes. Sarah felt a flicker of hope, quickly followed by suspicion. Why would you do that? Because Tommy is family. Because you're family. Because I'm tired of being the kind of man who lets children die over money and pride. And Jessica? What does she think about this sudden change of heart? I don't care what Jessica thinks. I care about doing the right thing. Sarah wanted to believe him, but trust was a luxury she couldn't afford. I need the money transferred tonight, David. Tommy can't wait for you to work through your family drama. You'll have it by morning, I promise. After ending the call, Sarah walked into the hospital and took the elevator to the pediatric oncology ward. The familiar sounds and smells enveloped her like a second skin. This was her world, her purpose, the place where she fought her daily battles against death and despair. Tommy was awake when she entered his room, his thin frame dwarfed by the hospital bed. His dark eyes lit up when he saw her. Aunt Sarah, the nurses said you went to see Uncle David. I did, sweetheart. How are you feeling? Tired. But Dr. Wong says the new medicine might help me feel better. Sarah sat on the edge of his bed, smoothing his hair away from his forehead. That's right. We're going to try some new treatments that might help you get strong again. Will they make me sick first? Like the last ones? The question pierced her heart. At 8 years old, Tommy had already endured more medical procedures than most adults experienced in a lifetime. They might make you feel worse before you feel better, she said honestly, but I'll be with you every step of the way. Promise? I promise. A knock at the door interrupted them. Dr. Patricia Wong entered, her expression grave. Sarah, could I speak with you privately? They stepped into the hallway, where Patricia immediately got to the point. We've run out of time. Tommy needs to start the experimental protocol tomorrow morning, or his window of opportunity closes. The treatment center in Houston has agreed to take him, but they need full payment up front. How much? Sarah asked, though she dreaded the answer. $250,000. They've increased the estimate based on his current condition. Sarah felt the world tilt beneath her feet. Even if David followed through on his promise, it wouldn't be enough. There might be another option, Patricia continued, a clinical trial at Johns Hopkins. It's free, but the mortality rate is 75%. It's a last resort protocol for patients who've exhausted all other options. Sarah stared at her friend and colleague, understanding the impossible choice being presented. Pay $250,000 for a treatment with uncertain outcomes, or enter Tommy into a trial that would likely kill him. I need to think, Sarah said. You have until 6 a.m. After that, Tommy's condition will deteriorate too rapidly for any intervention. Sarah returned to Tommy's room, where he had fallen asleep clutching a stuffed dinosaur she'd given him for his 7th birthday. She sat in the chair beside his bed, watching the rise and fall of his chest, counting each breath like a prayer. Her phone buzzed with a text message from an unknown number. If you want to save Tommy, meet me in the hospital cafeteria. Come alone. Jay. Jessica. Against her better judgment, Sarah made her way to the nearly empty cafeteria, where Jessica sat at a corner table nursing a cup of coffee. She looked different without the dinner party makeup and designer dress. Younger, more vulnerable. Thank you for coming, Jessica said as Sarah sat down. What do you want? To help you save Tommy. Sarah laughed bitterly. After what you did tonight, the recording, the lies. The recording was Margaret's idea. She wanted to destroy any remaining connection between you and David. And you went along with it. Yes, I did. Because I thought it would secure my future with David. Jessica looked down at her hands. But watching you tonight, seeing how much you love that little boy, I realized I was becoming someone I didn't want to be. What are you saying? Jessica reached into her purse and pulled out a cashier's check. $250,000, enough for Tommy's treatment. Sarah stared at the check, her heart pounding. Where did this come from? David's personal account. He gave me access to handle some business expenses. Jessica's smile was rueful. I guess this qualifies as an emergency expense. You stole from him? I borrowed from him, with interest. Consider it an advance on the settlement he'll pay me when I break up with him tomorrow. Sarah picked up the check, her hands trembling. It was real. Tommy could be saved. Why are you doing this? Because sometimes doing the right thing is more important than doing the smart thing. Jessica stood to leave. Save him, Sarah. Save that little boy and don't look back. What about David? When he finds out, let me worry about David. You just focus on Tommy. Jessica walked away, leaving Sarah alone with the check and the first real hope she'd felt in months. She looked at the piece of paper that represented Tommy's life, his future, his chance to grow up and become the man Elena had dreamed he would be. Tomorrow there would be consequences. Questions would be asked, investigations would begin, and the truth about the money would come to light. But tonight, Tommy would get his treatment. Sometimes that's all that mattered. Sarah stood at the reception desk of the treatment center at 6 a.m., the cashier's check trembling in her hands. The early morning light filtered through the hospital windows, illuminating dust motes that danced like tiny spirits in the air. Dr. Martinez? The receptionist, a kind-faced woman named Carol, looked up from her computer. We've been expecting you. I have the payment for Tommy Martinez's treatment, Sarah said, sliding the check across the counter. Carol examined the check, her eyes widening slightly at the amount. This is quite substantial. I'll need to verify funds before we can proceed. How long will that take? Usually 24 to 48 hours for an amount this large. Sarah's heart sank. Tommy can't wait that long. His oncologist said we have until this morning to start treatment. Let me speak with my supervisor. While Carol made her calls, Sarah paced the waiting area, her phone buzzing constantly with messages she couldn't bring herself to read. She knew David had probably discovered the missing money by now. She knew Jessica's plan, whatever it was, had likely been set into motion. Dr. Martinez? A tall man in a business suit approached her. I'm Dr. Harrison, the center's administrator. Carol tells me you're concerned about payment verification timing? My nephew is dying. We can't wait 2 days for bureaucracy. Dr. Harrison studied the check again. This is from a David Sterling account. Are you authorized to use these funds? The question hung in the air like a loaded gun. Sarah knew that a single word could make her a thief, a criminal who had stolen money to save a child's life. Yes, she lied smoothly. Mr. Sterling is my ex-husband. Tommy is his stepnephew. It wasn't entirely false. During their marriage, David had often referred to Tommy as family. I'll need documentation of that relationship and Mr. Sterling's consent for this expenditure. Sarah felt the walls closing in around her. Doctor, I understand your position, but this is a matter of life and death. Can you at least begin the treatment while we sort out the paperwork? Dr. Harrison was quiet for a long moment, studying Sarah's face. Finally, he nodded. We'll start the protocol this afternoon, but I'll need all documentation by end of business today, or we'll have to stop treatment immediately. Thank you, Sarah whispered, tears streaming down her face. By noon, Tommy was settled in his treatment room, IV lines running life-saving medicine into his small body. He was groggy from the pre-medications, but managed a weak smile when Sarah entered. Are you staying with me, Aunt Sarah? As long as you need me, sweetheart. Her phone had been buzzing nonstop since morning. 17 missed calls from David, 12 from Margaret Sterling, and surprisingly, 3 from Jessica. She had turned off the sound, but she could see the notifications lighting up her screen like warning flares. Finally, she couldn't ignore them anymore. She stepped into the hallway and called David back. "Sarah, thank God. Where are you?" "At the hospital with Tommy. Jessica told me what she did. The money she took from my account." Sarah closed her eyes, waiting for the accusations, the threats, the demands for immediate repayment. "Thank her for me," David said quietly. "What?" "Jessica did what I should have done months ago. She put Tommy's life ahead of politics and family drama. I'm grateful to her, and to you for accepting her help." "David, I didn't know she was going to take your money. If I had known, you would have refused it, which is exactly why she didn't tell you." Sarah sank into a chair in the hallway, overwhelmed by exhaustion and relief. "The hospital administrators are asking questions. They want documentation proving I had your consent to use the funds. You'll have it within the hour. I'm having my lawyers draft authorization papers as we speak." "What about your mother? What about the trust fund restrictions?" David's laugh was bitter. "My mother can go to hell, and the trust fund was never as restricted as she pretended. She was using it as leverage to control my choices. But I'm 42 years old, Sarah. It's time I started making my own decisions." After ending the call, Sarah returned to Tommy's room, where he was sleeping peacefully for the first time in weeks. The machines around his bed hummed quietly, monitoring every breath, every heartbeat, every sign of hope. Her phone rang again. This time it was Jessica. "How is he?" Jessica asked without preamble. "The treatment started this afternoon. It's too early to know if it's working, but he's stable." "Good, that's good." There was something wrong with Jessica's voice. She sounded strained, almost panicked. "Jessica, are you okay? I need to tell you something about what happened at dinner last night, about the recording." Sarah waited, her stomach tightening with dread. "It was fake, like David said, but not in the way you think." "What do you mean?" "I did use voice synthesis technology to create some of it, but some of the quotes were real. David did say some of those things, just not all at once, and not in that context." Sarah felt the world shift beneath her feet. "Which parts were real?" "He did say you chose your career over your marriage. He did say he felt suffocated sometimes. But he also said he loved you, that he admired your dedication, that he wished he could be as passionate about something as you are about medicine." I edited out all the positive comments and strung together only the negative ones. "Why are you telling me this now?" "Because Margaret Sterling is using it against all of us. She played that recording for the hospital board this morning, along with some creative editing of her own. She's trying to have your medical license suspended." The phone slipped from Sarah's numb fingers, clattering to the floor. She scrambled to pick it up. "What did you say?" "Margaret filed a complaint with the medical board, claiming you've been emotionally unstable since your divorce, that you've been making questionable decisions about patient care, and that you stole money to fund unnecessary treatments. The recording was evidence of your alleged breakdown." Sarah slumped against the wall, her legs unable to support her weight. "When is the hearing?" "Tomorrow morning. Sarah, I'm so sorry. I never meant for this to happen." "What about Tommy? If they suspend my license, will the treatment center still honor the payment?" "I don't know. David's lawyers are working on it, but Margaret has a lot of influence in medical circles." Sarah looked through the doorway at Tommy, sleeping peacefully in his hospital bed, unaware that his survival might depend on a medical board's decision about his aunt's fitness to practice medicine. She had saved his life, but in doing so, she might have destroyed her own. The worst was yet to come. The medical board hearing took place in a sterile conference room at Seattle Children's Hospital, the same building where Sarah had spent the last decade saving lives. Now she sat at a defendant's table, facing 5 doctors who held her career in their hands. Margaret Sterling sat in the gallery behind the board members, perfectly composed in a charcoal gray suit that matched her steel-colored hair. She had allies on this board, colleagues who respected her family's generous donations to medical research. Her influence was a living thing in the room, invisible but unmistakable. "Dr. Martinez," the board chairman, Dr. Kenneth Walsh, began, "you're here to respond to allegations of professional misconduct specifically claims that you've been emotionally compromised since your divorce and that you appropriated funds under false pretenses to pay for unauthorized treatment. Sarah's lawyer, a sharp young woman named Rebecca Chen, had advised her to remain calm and factual. But as Dr. Walsh read the charges against her, Sarah felt her composure cracking. The evidence suggests, Dr. Walsh continued, that you've been operating under significant personal stress that may have affected your professional judgment. We have a recording of your ex-husband stating that you prioritized your career over your marriage to an unhealthy degree and that your emotional instability has worsened since your divorce. Margaret Sterling had edited Jessica's fabricated recording even further, removing any context that might cast Sarah in a sympathetic light. The voice that emerged from the conference room speaker sounded like David, but the words were a weaponized version of their most private moments. That recording is fabricated, Sarah said, her voice steady despite the rage building inside her. It's been manipulated using voice synthesis technology. Dr. Walsh looked skeptical. Can you prove that? Rebecca Chen stood. We have a forensic audio analysis that shows clear evidence of digital manipulation. And we have testimony from Mrs. Margaret Sterling that she personally heard Mr. Sterling make these statements, Dr. Walsh replied. Mrs. Sterling, would you like to address the board? Margaret rose gracefully, every inch the respected philanthropist and community leader. Thank you, Dr. Walsh. I want to preface my remarks by saying I have tremendous respect for Dr. Martinez's medical skills, but as someone who witnessed her behavior during her marriage to my son, I can attest that she has struggled with work-life balance issues that have only intensified since their divorce. She paused, allowing her words to sink in. The incident with her nephew's treatment funding is particularly concerning. Dr. Martinez took $250,000 from my son's account without his knowledge, then lied to hospital administrators about having authorization. This suggests someone whose judgment has been severely compromised by personal circumstances. That's not what happened, Sarah interrupted, earning a warning look from her lawyer. Isn't it? Margaret's voice was conversational, almost pitying. Dr. Martinez, you signed a falsified authorization form. You told the treatment center you had Mr. Sterling's permission when you did not. You appropriated funds that weren't yours to save a patient who might have been better served by palliative care rather than aggressive treatment that will likely fail anyway. The last comment hit Sarah like a physical blow. Tommy is not a hopeless case. The experimental protocol has shown promising results in similar patients. Has it? Or are you so emotionally invested in this child that you're pursuing futile treatments at enormous expense? Sometimes, doctor, the kindest thing we can do for our patients is to let them go peacefully. Sarah shot to her feet, her composure finally shattering. That child is 8 years old. He deserves every chance we can give him. Even if it bankrupts his family, even if it requires theft, even if it causes you to violate every ethical principle you swore to uphold? The room fell silent except for the hum of the ventilation system. Sarah realized she was breathing hard, her hands clenched into fists at her sides. She looked around the room and saw the faces of colleagues who had worked with her for years, now viewing her with suspicion and concern. Dr. Walsh cleared his throat. Dr. Martinez, please sit down. We need to discuss the specifics of your nephew's case. Tommy's not her nephew, Margaret said quietly. He's the son of her deceased sister, Elena. Dr. Martinez has no legal relationship to this child whatsoever. She's been representing herself as his guardian to medical personnel, but she has no legal standing to make treatment decisions for him. The revelation struck the room like lightning. Sarah felt the floor disappear beneath her feet. Is this true, Dr. Martinez? Dr. Walsh asked. Sarah's mouth opened and closed soundlessly. Legally, Margaret was correct. Elena had never formalized guardianship arrangements for Tommy. After the car accident, Sarah had simply taken him in, and the hospital had accepted her authority without question. I'm the only family he has left, she whispered. That may be true emotionally, Dr. Walsh said, but it doesn't give you legal authority to make medical or financial decisions on his behalf. Dr. Martinez, did you misrepresent your relationship to Tommy Martinez to obtain treatment authorization? Sarah looked at her lawyer, who was frantically shuffling through papers, searching for some legal loophole that might save her client's career. Yes, Sarah admitted. I misrepresented my legal status. but I did it to save his life. And that's exactly the kind of compromised judgment we're concerned about, Dr. Walsh replied. Dr. Martinez, pending a full investigation, this board is suspending your medical license for 6 months. You're also barred from practicing at any facility affiliated with Seattle Children's Hospital. The words hit Sarah like physical blows. Her life's work, her identity, her purpose, everything was being stripped away. What happens to Tommy? She asked. Child Protective Services will be contacted to determine appropriate guardianship. The treatment will continue under court supervision. Sarah stood on unsteady legs, her vision blurring with tears. You're destroying my life over paperwork. We're protecting the integrity of the medical profession, Dr. Walsh replied. I'm sorry, Dr. Martinez. This gives me no pleasure. As Sarah walked out of the conference room, she caught sight of Margaret Sterling's reflection in the hallway windows. The older woman was smiling. Sarah had lost everything. Her career, her relationship with Tommy, her future. But the game wasn't over yet. Not by a long shot. 3 weeks after the medical board hearing, Sarah sat in a cramped studio apartment in South Seattle, surrounded by cardboard boxes and the detritus of a dismantled life. The prestigious condo overlooking Elliott Bay was gone, sold to pay legal fees and hospital bills. Her BMW had been repossessed. Her medical practice had folded after clients fled following news coverage of her license suspension. The morning news played on a small television balanced on a folding chair, the volume turned low. Former pediatric oncologist Sarah Martinez remains under investigation for medical fraud and child endangerment charges. Martinez, who was stripped of her medical license last month, allegedly misrepresented her legal authority to authorize expensive experimental treatments for a minor child using funds taken from her ex-husband's account without permission. Sarah turned off the television and walked to the window, looking out at the busy street below. People hurried past carrying coffee and briefcases, heading to jobs and lives that still made sense. She had become invisible, another casualty of a system that prioritized procedure over compassion. Her phone, now a basic model she'd bought at a convenience store, buzzed with a text from Jessica. Can we meet? It's important. They met at a diner in Georgetown, far from the upscale neighborhoods where they might be recognized. Jessica looked different, thinner, exhausted, her usual polished appearance replaced by jeans and a worn sweater. How is Tommy? Sarah asked before Jessica could speak. Responding well to treatment, the doctors say he has a 70% chance of full remission. Sarah closed her eyes, feeling relief wash over her. It was the first good news she'd heard in weeks. Thank you for telling me. I know you didn't have to. Sarah, there's something else. Something you need to know about Margaret Sterling. Jessica reached into her purse and pulled out a manila folder, setting it on the table between them. After the medical board hearing, I hired a private investigator to look into Margaret's background. What I found will destroy her. Sarah opened the folder, revealing financial documents, photographs, and legal papers. Margaret hasn't been managing the Sterling family wealth, Jessica continued. She's been embezzling from it. For 15 years, she's been moving money through shell companies and offshore accounts. The family trust is nearly bankrupt. Sarah studied the documents, her medical training helping her parse complex information quickly. How much? $47 million. She's been using David's trust fund to maintain her lifestyle and cover investment losses from her private portfolio. Why are you showing me this? Jessica leaned forward, her voice intense. Because I know how we can get your life back. Margaret destroyed you to cover her own crimes. She was afraid that if you dug too deep into David's finances to secure Tommy's treatment, you'd discover the missing money. I don't understand. Think about it. Why was Margaret so determined to keep you away from David's trust fund? Why did she go to such lengths to discredit you professionally? She needed you to look like an unstable, dishonest person so that if you ever discovered her embezzlement, no one would believe you. Sarah felt a chill run down her spine. The dinner party, the recording, the medical board hearing, it was all to protect herself. Exactly, and now we have proof. Sarah stared at the documents, understanding the implications. With this evidence, she could destroy Margaret Sterling's reputation and possibly recover her own career. But it would also devastate David, who still believed his mother was acting in his best interests. What do you want in return? Sarah asked. Jessica's smile was sad. Nothing. I'm done playing games with other people's lives. David deserves to know the truth about his mother, and you deserve justice. What about your relationship with David? Over. I broke up with him 2 weeks ago. Turns out I'm not cut out for the trophy wife lifestyle after all. She paused. Besides, I think he's still in love with you. Sarah shook her head. Too much has happened. Too much has been broken. Maybe, but at least you can get your medical license back. You can practice medicine again. You can help other children like Tommy. That night, Sarah sat in her tiny apartment, the documents spread across her folding table, like pieces of a puzzle. She had the power to destroy Margaret Sterling, to expose her crimes and recover everything that had been stolen from her. But revenge was a dangerous medicine, and Sarah had seen too many patients poisoned by their own anger. She thought about Tommy, sleeping peacefully in his hospital bed, his body fighting off cancer cells with the help of treatments she had made possible. She thought about all the other children who might benefit from her skills if she could return to medicine. Most importantly, she thought about the universal truth that every parent understood. Sometimes you had to lose everything to save the one thing that mattered most. Sarah picked up her phone and called the FBI's financial crimes hotline. I'd like to report a case of embezzlement and fraud, she said when the agent answered. The reckoning was about to begin. 6 months later, Sarah stood in the hallway outside the federal courthouse in downtown Seattle, watching through tall windows as news vans gathered on the street below. The Margaret Sterling embezzlement trial had captivated the city, revealing the hidden corruption beneath one of its most respected philanthropic families. Inside courtroom 12, Margaret Sterling sat at the defendant's table in an orange jumpsuit, her once pristine appearance now reflecting her fallen status. The steel magnolia had finally wilted under the weight of her own greed. Sarah had testified the previous week, explaining how Margaret's financial manipulation had destroyed her career and nearly cost Tommy his life. The jury had listened with rapt attention as she described the web of lies and fake recordings designed to discredit anyone who might uncover the truth. Now, as closing arguments concluded, Sarah felt a hand on her shoulder. She turned to find David Sterling standing behind her, looking older and wearier than she remembered. Sarah, I didn't expect to see you here. I needed to see it through to the end, she replied. They stood in awkward silence, two people whose lives had been shattered by the same woman's machinations. I'm sorry, David said finally, for everything, for not believing you, for not protecting you, for being too weak to stand up to her sooner. You couldn't have known what she was capable of. Couldn't I? She's been controlling my life for 42 years. I should have seen the signs. Through the courtroom doors, they could hear the judge calling for order as the jury returned with their verdict. Guilty on all counts. Sarah felt a mixture of relief and sadness. Justice had been served, but at such a tremendous cost to so many lives. What will you do now? David asked as they walked toward the courthouse exit. I got my medical license back last month. I'm starting a new practice focused on pediatric oncology research. That's wonderful. You belong in medicine, Sarah. You're gifted at it. What about you? David managed a weak smile. Rebuilding. The company survived, barely. I'm working with federal investigators to recover what assets we can from my mother's shell companies. It'll take years to sort out the mess she made. They emerged onto the courthouse steps, where reporters immediately surrounded them with cameras and microphones. Dr. Martinez, how does it feel to have your name cleared? Mr. Sterling, will you be filing civil suits against your mother? Do you plan to reconcile now that the truth has come out? Sarah and David pushed through the crowd without answering, making their way to a quieter corner of the plaza. There's something else, David said once they were alone. Something I wanted you to know before you heard it from someone else. Sarah braced herself for more revelations. I'm selling the estate, all of it. The house, the grounds, everything. The proceeds will go to establish the Tommy Martinez Foundation for Pediatric Cancer Research. Sarah stared at him in shock. David, you don't have to do that. Yes, I do. That house was built on corruption and maintained through manipulation. It needs to become something better, something that honors what you've been fighting for all these years. And Tommy? How is he? David's smile was genuine for the first time in months. He's incredible, fully in remission, back in school, Playing soccer again. He asks about you constantly. I'd like to see him. He'd like that too. We all would. They walked together toward the parking garage. Two people who had loved each other once and might learn to love each other again, given time and healing. Sarah, David said as they reached her car, I know I don't deserve another chance. I know I hurt you in ways that might never heal completely. But if you're willing, I'd like to try to earn your forgiveness. Not as a way back to what we had, but as a path toward something better. Sarah studied his face, seeing the man she had fallen in love with so many years ago, before money and power had corrupted their relationship. I'm not ready for that conversation yet, she said honestly, but maybe someday. I can wait, David replied, however long it takes. As Sarah drove away from the courthouse, she felt something she hadn't experienced in months. Hope, not for a romantic reconciliation, but for the possibility of healing, of rebuilding her life on a foundation of truth rather than deception. Her phone rang as she pulled into traffic. Tommy's voice filled the car through the speaker system. Aunt Sarah, did you see the news? The bad lady is going to jail. Sarah laughed, the first genuine laughter she'd experienced since this nightmare began. I saw, sweetheart. How are you feeling? Great. The doctors say I'm all better. When are you coming to visit? Soon, Tommy. Very soon. I can't wait to show you my soccer trophy. And guess what? Uncle David is teaching me to play chess. The last piece of the puzzle fell into place. David wasn't just selling the estate or establishing the foundation as gestures of atonement. He was actively building a relationship with Tommy, becoming the father figure the boy had never had. Maybe some good could come from all this pain after all. Tommy, Sarah said, how would you like to help me with my new medical practice? I could use an assistant who understands what kids with cancer are going through. Really? Could I help other kids like me? Absolutely. We'll save lives together. As Sarah drove through the Seattle streets toward her future, she reflected on the lessons learned from her own Last Supper. Sometimes the people who seem to love you are really trying to destroy you. Sometimes the people who seem to destroy you are actually trying to save you. And sometimes when you lose everything, you discover what really matters. Justice had been served, but more importantly, mercy had triumphed. Tommy was alive and thriving. Sarah had reclaimed her purpose. David was learning to be the man he should have been all along. The Last Supper was over, but the real feast of forgiveness and redemption was just beginning. Some stories end with dessert. The best ones end with hope. And that's how Sarah Martinez discovered that sometimes the most dangerous person at the dinner table is the one offering to help serve dessert. This story raises an uncomfortable question that I bet many of you have thought about. How far would you go to save someone you love? Would you lie to doctors? Would you steal money? Would you destroy your own career? The scary truth is, most of us don't know the answer until we're forced to find out. What did you think of Margaret Sterling's manipulation tactics? Could you have seen through Jessica's fake kindness? And here's the big question. Do you think Sarah and David can actually rebuild their relationship after everything that happened? Or are some betrayals just too deep to forgive? I want to hear your thoughts in the comments below. Tell me which character's decisions surprised you the most, and whether you think Sarah made the right choices along the way. If this story kept you on the edge of your seat for the full hour, hit that like button to let me know. And if you're curious about more psychological thrillers that explore the dark side of family dynamics and medical ethics, make sure you're subscribed with notifications on, because next week I'm bringing you a story about a surgeon who discovers her own hospital has been covering up patient deaths for profit. Share this with someone who loves a good revenge story, but maybe warn them first that they might want to clear their schedule. Because once you start listening to these stories, it's pretty hard to stop. Thanks for spending your time with me today. I'll see you in the next story, where we'll dive even deeper into the question of how good people can make terrible choices when everything they love is on the line. Until then, remember, the most dangerous suppers are the ones where everyone's smiling.